Grief is a powerful thing, so let's talk about it. It just takes one insensitive comment while someone is in grief to ruin an entire relationship. A few years ago, I had this one client who was an ESG firm, and the guy who ran it was really passionate about human rights and was always on a soapbox about one thing or another about this UN sustainable goal or this human rights crisis and save everybody, right? So the Parkland massacre happens one day, and it was the same day we had our weekly meeting. And if you know me, you know that I'm so protective of children. So this is really hard for me to cope with. And this was a school shooting, right? And so I got a little emotional in the meeting, and it wasn't like I went hysterical or anything. I just like tears came to my eyes as I was talking about it. So this guy turns around and he says something like, look, these things happen. You shouldn't get so dramatic about it. Come on, bro. Are you kidding me? What a jerk. I mean, there was I showing this moment of vulnerability, and he totally just I felt like he was kicking me when I was down, I was already feeling bad, and he took that emotion. I feel like he kind of used it against me and shamed me for it. And after that, I just never saw him the same way. Like, I continued to work with him, and he was my client. So it was like, I kept going with the relationship, but I never really believed in any of his rhetoric about human rights after that. And a few months later, the relationship ended. And to this day, I consider him a total a-hole. I want to have nothing to do with him. So that's kind of an extreme example, but it does show you how it really just takes one insensitive comment to destroy an entire relationship when a person is in a vulnerable or sensitive place. So how do we do this right? How do financial advisors deal with somebody who is in grief? I'm always asked by my clients about this. And today I've got Kathi Valasek here to talk about grief literacy and leadership. Kathi is a grief communication consultant and the founder of the One Well Widow podcast. So Kathi, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sarah. I am so thrilled to be here. And I share in your story, in this lead in of I'm very protective of children and what people say matters. So I'm thrilled to share what I know from my point of view.
Did I say your name right, Kathi?
It's Valasek, but it's just one of those things that it's just going to get annihilated by everybody. I've accepted it.
Okay. Well, sorry for that. So, so talk to me about this experience, so you help financial advisors that have widows currently as their clients or will have widows as their clients in the future. You say that you speak widow. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes. So a little bit of backstory, I became a young widow with 5 children in my 30s. And, my husband passed away of cancer. He fought it for 5 years. And, widowhood, that type of death, that type of grief is financial. So you can lose a brother, a parent, a sibling, a child. It doesn't become financial unless it's a spouse. And I was on the other end of the desk of the financial advisor that, I did not take an active role in the long-term planning. Prior to this, I was raising kids, working, all of that. I didn't really give it a thought, and I think that's pretty typical. And I didn't have a rapport relationship with my current financial advisor. And once this happened, I didn't stick around. I found a new one, and we've all heard that over 70% of widows leave their financial advisor after the first year. And I didn't have that rapport or relationship to accept some financial advice or anything like that. So I believe that financial advisors are a key piece to the puzzle of widows moving forward. However, the communication piece, how it lands, the difference between men and women and how they receive information and body language and listening skills is quite different. And a widow receives it differently. So I experienced that first year.
That's so interesting. It's something I, to be honest with you, never have thought about. With the part where you said the widow receives the information differently.
Yes.
Never
Well,
would have thought. Okay. So tell me more about that.
Think of men and women. We have different body languages, and men are very much report style charts and graphs, and women are very rapport style, where we're about the relationship, getting to know people. We're very concerned that everybody participates in the conversation. And so they're very different. And so it lands differently. And if you haven't built up that relationship, about your clients, your female clients, it's not the best time to start when they become a widow, because they're going to hear about 10% of what you say. They are in a fog. They, typically what happens is for me, I got handed a big handbook and a workbook and all the things I needed to do.
All the data. Yeah.
And it's just not the space. And so part of what I teach and what I truly want to help financial advisors understand is the process that widows go through that first year, and how we can organize the paperwork, how we can organize our empathetic actions into now, soon, and later, and so that we can start to relate, because our ultimate goal is financial education to our client. And unless it's received, unless we know how to relate, it won't happen.
So what is grief literacy?
So grief literacy is a very new term, and it is normalizing the conversation around grief. Because honestly, Sarah, I say I'm a widow, and I'm like the turd in the punch bowl. Nobody wants to be around me. They just scram. People don't want to talk about death and grief. It makes them very uncomfortable. And so grief literacy is teaching every person, every human, that death is one of the most normal experiences that we are going to have, but it's not a normal conversation. We were not taught the language of loss.
What is the language of loss?
Language of loss is actually expressing to people and acknowledging their grief, saying the terms death and died and cancer, and using those terms, not avoiding the conversation. So many people struggle with, and I'm in a lot of widows groups, so I hear this. So many struggle with, they avoid widows. They don't want to talk about it. They don't know what to say. It's very awkward. They don't want to say the wrong thing. They're very well-meaning, but they don't want to say the wrong thing. And so they either do nothing, or like you said in your intro, something dismissive, like, oh, you'll get over it, or, oh, you'll move on, things will get better. And so they come up with these types of statements that are not helpful to somebody who's grieving. And another big part of grief literacy is we bring this sort of unconscious bias to death. I guess it's, people think it's okay if they lost their spouse because they died of old age. But if it's suicide, or if it's an overdose, or, we bring this unconscious set of biases to that grief conversation that can kind of stymie what we truly feel and what we want to say. So my job, it's a privilege, Sarah, it truly is, because, my husband passed 15 years ago. I've had the chance to grow and move forward in my life, but it's a privilege to help future widows, future bereaved humans, that they will not have to suffer the same types of statements, dismissiveness, passiveness, I'm not in the room type of feelings.
Oh, get over it. Right.
Yeah. Just get over it. Oh, you're young. You'll meet somebody new. You'll get married. Like that's the answer. But
some advisors might feel like, but I'm not a therapist. I'm here to manage your money. I'm not here to be Oprah Winfrey.
Right. I'm really glad you brought that up, because a lot of times people will say similar things like that. And, I'm not a counselor, I'm not a therapist. But what you are is you are an excellent, knowledgeable person about building a livelihood for this person. And so learning to think about what you say, practice those scripts, practice what to say. I have several things you can download on my website of what to say, what to ask, questions that drive connection, engagement, because the overall purpose is to get to know your clients. And it has nothing to do with counseling. It has to do with empathy, to truly put yourself in your client's shoes for a moment.
Yeah, but it's hard unless you've lost somebody. Like I actually lost somebody that was like just a really good friend a while ago, and the lack of empathy was unbelievable. Mm-hmm. Like that people, if you haven't gone through something like this, but like it is true. Like in our society, it's a thing where we just want to erase each other's emotions as a general rule, anytime it's something that we don't quite know how to deal with. So, but Kathi, I like what you said about, like there's the whole thing of like the language of loss, et cetera, if it were ever get to that point where your client were to lose a spouse, right? But what about like I liked what you said about the part before it, which is that a lot of times the financial advisor doesn't even have a relationship with the wife. And I mean, this is a kind of gender slanted conversation because we're assuming that the woman is the one that's not in close contact with the advisor, because I think for maybe some of the more senior generations, that was the way that it was the man handled the finances, and certainly not true in every case. But I really do see it even in the younger generations, where there are people my age, they're financial advisors, and they're like, well, this couple came to me and, the husband is I met with the husband first. And I'm like, you didn't insist that the wife be at the meeting. And he's like, well, I got the feeling, that the guy pretty much calls the shots in the relationship. So I didn't bother to ask. Or I asked him if the wife should come along and he said no. So I'm just going to let it go. He probably is the one who manages the money and she's not too involved. It's like, really? I wonder how she feels about you feeling that way.
Mm-hmm. Well, to be honest, Sarah, there's a lot of data right now in that's true, that the women do handle maybe the finances of the household, and they run the household. Women are now educated, they have jobs, they have careers, child rearing, but still statistically, males far outweigh the decision makers in long-term planning. And I have a couple.
Where are those statistics? I'm really curious.
I'm going to send them to you. I'll send them in the notes. And there's a couple studies on widows and financial advisors. And the researcher is Brian Korb. And it was really interesting to look at, we've come a long way, but historically, this has been a male-dominated industry, and we're getting there. And when we look at females, and part of our job, when I say widows are your current and future client, what I'm really saying is every female you have, you need to do some work up front. And
Right. Do
because
the work up front before the event happens.
before the event
Okay.
happens,
Right.
because there's so many actions. I mean, you just look at like a profile of, if you work with me, I'm going to teach you how to do a conversational profile where you really get to know your female clients. Where did they grow up? What is their family like? Their children, their ages, their schools, things that women love to talk about. And so when they come to you into your office in that bereaved moment, you have a conversation.
Yeah.
And
There's
that
trust is there already because of, I can't even
yes,
imagine that. Yeah.
because you have to have that connection. I can't tell you how many times either my insurance professional, my financial advisor, I had to remind them that I have 5 children. And I had to remind them it was 3 girls and 2 boys. They didn't even get the number right, let alone the name or ages or schools. And
yeah, I understand that. Yeah.
And for women,
Well, I think it's also, Kathy, not to dilute the argument here, but I have 4 kids, you have 5 kids. A lot of people can't, like my doctors can't remember the order of my kids. It's like, that is kind of endemic to having a large family too. Not trying to take away your thunder here, but I see what you're saying.
I completely agree with you. I don't think they have to be the do-all and remember everything. But if you want somebody to listen to you, you need to show them that you care. And that's
the point, I think, of what you're saying, right?
It is. And for females specifically, with the gender pay gap, the fact that we have taken time off several times to rear children or to take care of parents, we've now lost half of our income. And for some women, they've lost all of it in a death. And so where do you go from there? And a bigger piece of my story is to truly advocate for widows. I want changes in pensions, pension laws, Social Security laws, bereavement leaves, health insurance. When my husband passed, I knew I had 1 year. I was a teacher. And I knew I had 1 year left on.
Kathy, can I just ask you something? How old were your kids when your husband passed away?
They were 4, 6, 9, 13, and 16.
Okay, so you had the youngest one was in preschool, and then the oldest one was about to go to college.
Almost in college.
Okay.
So I knew I had to get better insurance. I knew I had to provide more for my family. So I went back to school and I got a higher degree. And the way Social Security works is, it's capped out. I think at that time it was like, 1,300 and, about $1,300 a month.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
So that pays for like daycare. Okay. Like for one kid. Okay.
And I finished my degree and I started teaching at the university. And so if I made more than about $1,400, you have to pay back to Social Security's every $1 to $2 that you make. So I'm working twice as hard for half as much. So, I lived that life for 10 years of just, I'd work more, but then because if you want to advance in your career, I needed to teach more classes. And then I would get the letter every month from Social Security that says, well, you made over this amount, so you owe us $450 this month or $620. So it's this money mindset of a widow where I think a financial advisor can really help and relate to. Because even though I had life insurance, I had a good settlement. You know, my husband was a pilot for FedEx, great company, great pension. This money came with the ultimate price. So there is a lot of guilt, shame, baggage surrounding money in a widow's life. And then when you look at Social Security limitations, you look at pensions. If I remarry, my pension is done. So there's a lot of things in society that I want to change for future widows. I want them to be able to be free to move forward and not stipulated by this one life event that they had nothing to do with. That's my ultimate, you know, link elbows with people and let's make real change.
All right. So this is just very educational for me because I've known broadly about these things, but I never realized on a broader scale how the system seems to be kind of working against you. So this is good for financial advisors to know about. But Kathi, can you tell me a little bit more about what the best practices should be for financial advisors that want to make these positive changes in their practice? Like you say to somebody, like, so there's financial advisors listening to this saying, you know, I realize I haven't been equipped that if someone were to pass, what I should do, right? How do they know what language to say? How do they know what programs to put in place, et cetera?
Mm-hmm.
Not just like how to like use these resources or whatever, but what
Right.
are the things specifically that they need to do?
Okay, good. And that question is basically, you know, the acronym for what I teach. I teach a CARE program: communication, action, relationship, education. And the first one with communication is we really practice what to say and what not to say. I mean, that's basic level.
Where can people read about that? Do you have a blog?
They can go to my website, kathivalasek.com. It has all of those articles, it has downloads. And so you don't have to guess. This is just things you don't say, things you do.
Give me an example of something you do say.
Okay, so something that you would say meeting a widow for the first time is you want to ask questions, okay? You want to maybe, if you say, I'm sorry, you know, that's kind of been done. They're hearing that everywhere, right? You might want to say, I can't imagine what you're going through. I really enjoyed conversations I had with Tom. And you use the spouse's name.
Yeah. Yep. Yes.
You know, they really want to talk about their spouse.
Yeah.
They really do. And so you get them talking in conversation, and then you might ask things like, what do you have a lot of family in town now? What is that like for you? Do you want space? Do you want them to go? Or is that
you want space? Yep. That's a great question. Instead of making assumptions. Right.
So I have a lot of those types of samples on my website where you can just go and put them in your own words of truly what keeps the bereaved client engaged and talking. Because when they're talking, a financial advisor is listening and they're pulling out the gaps, you know, and saying something like, what is one thing today that I could take off your plate? And, you know, it might be filling out a form. It might be they're having problems, you know, calling a credit card company. I mean, truly the volume, this is my analogy of the volume of paperwork and things to handle when you're a widow. It's like taking a 5,000 piece puzzle and scattering it on the ground, all of those pieces. And then when you look at the box on the puzzle of how to rebuild it, there's no picture. I don't know how to rebuild a life. I had to learn. You don't know. And it's putting all of those pieces, and it is completely overwhelming. It's debilitating.
Okay. Like, what about if you feel like the widow is in need of mental support, like counseling? The phrase, maybe you should talk to somebody. That's it's so cringeworthy because there's kind of a little bit of shame built into that.
Yes.
And
yes, this is one part of the action piece that you can do now is your team should be creating resources, links, phone numbers, places for widows groups, counselors that you could recommend, all the things, your community best, and you should have resources for them if they need that. It's not a financial advisor's job or my job to say, you need to go seek counseling. I can.
Okay, I understand that, but when you see the signs that someone might be suicidal or falling into a depression, do you just ignore it?
No.
Like, how could you just ignore that?
No, you don't ignore it. But, from a confidentiality standpoint, that's not your job. What you can do is continue to ask. Who have you talked to? Do you have family support? Do you need some recommendations of?
Right. Do you need some Okay.
Yes, it's always.
Do you feel you're getting the emotional support that you need?
Yes. We kind of come in when there's grief. We want to fix, right? We want to fix it when we really need to keep on asking what they need. Ask to learn, not fix, because they're in the driver's seat to their life. And if we can develop a rapport and a trust, they're going to stick with you. And truly, I cannot tell you how much they need a financial advisor in their court. You can't even imagine. I've raised 5 kids. 4 of them are college grads, and 1 is finishing college right now. I couldn't have done that. Even just the little things.
So when you found your new financial advisor, how did you find him or her? And what was it during the interview process that made you feel as a widow that this time around it was going to be better?
It was referred by a friend, and it was somebody I already knew. I already knew this person. I felt comfortable with him. He knew about my life. He cared about my life. He started asking more questions about what I wanted in my future. He allowed space for me to talk about John. He gave me a ton of resources. He didn't overload me. He gave me a 1-page bullet sheet, and he said, we're going to work on this together. So I didn't have to leave just overwhelmed, but it was all about the communication and the relationship. And there is some theory behind some of those things of what widows specifically look for. And in another study, because I'm a university professor, so I'm into the research, and they say that the top 3 things that they're influenced by is, number 1, that they are empathetic and that they have great communication skills and that they can relate. Those are the top 3. And then the next one is a confident financial planner. And the last influence is gender. And so gender was very low on the totem pole. It was, definitely relational, empathetic communication were the top things desired by a widow and a financial advisor.
Yeah. I say it all the time that there's nothing that really differentiates one financial advisor from the next. I know that all of y'all listening to this think like, no, my proprietary research is the best, or like my performance is better than all the other advisors, or my financial planning that I like exported from eMoney, like that's, I do the financial plans better. Money Guide Pro is better than eMoney or whatever, right? Not saying that it is, I'm just saying that's what, like, people have all kinds of opinions about that being what the value factor is. And it is none of those things. It is how you communicate with the person. That is the value proposition, because nobody's really doing that much. No one's really doing anything that different. Like I said, eMoney is not that different from Money Guide Pro. Is one better than the other? I mean, it's a toss up.
Well, one thing that I believe in is, as a teacher, is that I like to meet people where they are. You know, there's no judgment. I just want to help you. And these are doable things. You can learn to communicate better. You can learn and practice what to say. When you go to the service and the memorial service, I'm going to teach you exactly what to say, and you're going to practice it in your own words. You know, these are doable, tangible things that if you can relate, build rapport, you are going to have referrals for life, because women, they are a very tribal, loyal, word of mouth culture. We don't go research everything. We ask the people we know. Who's the best teacher here? Who do I need for childcare? Who do I need for an insurance person? And if you can shout it to the world that you champion widows, I'm telling you, they will come to you.
Yeah, well, I would tend to look at it that being a more effective communicator with a widow will elevate your overall communication skills for non-widows and widows alike. For example, I have 4 children, 3 of them are neurotypical, 1 is autistic. And I had to go through so much training, and it really increased my sensitivity about how to communicate with somebody that processes information differently, really differently. And so as a result, I'm so much better at what I do, and I never would have gotten there without having learned this style, because it just doesn't impact, it doesn't just impact who I'm directly, like how I communicate directly with my clients. It impacts how I teach them to communicate with their clients. Like one of my clients the other day was like, you know, this person has ADHD. And I designed this presentation that the financial advisor said like was just raving about, because I learned that different communication style. So it's not just like, oh, well, I'm never going to, you know, I'm never going to work with widows, so it doesn't matter. It's like, it's a worthwhile exercise, because we can all communicate better. We can all learn to listen better and empathize better with other people, all of us.
I concur. You know, I focus on widows because it is what I know. It's what I'm passionate about. But this could translate very easily into women in transition, and helping them. But overall, you become aware of other people's pain, and you will become a better partner, a better parent, a better employee, a better boss, basically a better human, because you start to see things and think about what you said today to one other person really made a wonderful difference in their life. Right. And that flows over into every area of your life. So I'm really glad you brought that up.
Yeah. All right. Listen, Kathi, we've got to wrap here, but thanks so much for being on the show. How can people reach you?
They can find me on LinkedIn, Kathi Valasek. I'm pretty active there. And my website, kathivalasek.com. You can see everything I do there. I also have my widow podcast, because I podcast weekly of how to help widows move forward in their life. And so, yeah, that's
Thank
the
you.
good.
Yeah, Kathi, thank you for doing it. Thank you for being an advocate. That's really important.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Sarah. I so appreciate this time and space with you and getting to know you. I've admired what you do and follow you, and so I really appreciate it.
Well, I really don't get that a lot. I get it from the other side too a lot, but people who don't appreciate it, I mean, I hear from them all the time. So it's nice to hear from someone who does appreciate it. Well, thank you. Okay, everybody. That's all we got for now. See you next time.